Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hi, Rinat. Welcome to this new podcast.
Hi, Amit. Yes, I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for starting this off.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for this idea of talking about technical topics that we are both keenly working on. So I think it'll be useful for the audience, whoever wants to learn about new topics, and it would be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we obviously professionally, we both have a lot of experience, and I thought it's a good idea to spread that experience that we've gathered over many years and working for many companies. We came to know a lot of things, and it will help someone who is new in their career. They could get a lot of benefit from all the things that we come to know over the years. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea to sort of distribute that knowledge that we've gathered.
I like that. So let's start with the introductions. I'll introduce myself first to the audience. So hello everyone who's watching. My name is Amit Sarkar. I am a test consultant. I've worked in testing for now almost 14 years. I have worked for big telecom companies, IT consultancy companies like Tata Consultancy Services, and I've also worked for startups, and I'm currently based in London, UK, and I am currently working on a UiPath testing project. So that's a bit of introduction from my side. I'll hand it over to Rinat.
Yes, so I am Rinat Malik, and I am an RPA specialist. So what I do is I strategically guide various businesses on how to implement RPA in their organization. I also help build various robots, which is RPA is all about. So RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation, which is to do with building robots which will automate repetitive processes. And that's my area of expertise. I've worked for various large organizations like BMW Financial Services or British Petroleum, as well as UBS, the bank, Swiss bank. So I've seen a lot of successful implementation, and I've also seen some places, some businesses where it failed, and I've learned from all of these experiences.
So, just for the benefit of everyone who's listening or watching, me and Rinat, we are currently working on this project together, and it's something that's related to do with Brexit, but we can't tell you more beyond that. But in this podcast, we will focus on Rinat's journey into RPA and the tools that are currently in RPA, and we'll try to understand what can be done with these tools. So let me first ask Rinat this question. Uh, you told about RPA, robotic process automation. So can you tell us a bit more about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with, if you'd like, what is RPA? So RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. And basically what it is, as soon as we hear about robots, we first think about, robots that we see in science fictions like C3PO or
Yes.
R2D2. As cool as it would have been to work with that kind of robots, unfortunately, that's not the kind of robots that I work. So in RPA, the robots I build uh, are software-based robots. So they live inside a computer. And what they do is they help humans do the repetitive task that needs to be done. And basically, take away all the boring tasks from humans so humans can do more creative tasks. The way it does it is the way the robots work is we sort of program it to basically show exactly which steps that needs to be taken for a for a particular process, which buttons to press in which web application or which desktop application, and then once it knows which exact step by step it needs to take to do a process, it can just repeat those processes. We can also put, some intelligence in it, so it will be able to make decisions. We could also integrate some artificial intelligence in it, so it will be able to understand and take decisions based on human handwriting. So these are some of the cutting edge aspects of robotics. But yeah, with robotics, you can virtually do any process that is fully integrated within the computer. I mean, obviously, if a process requires you to print a document and then send it physically to somewhere, the robot is not going to be able to do that because it is living inside the computer. But anything that is happening inside computer, even if there is handwritten PDF or alike, the robot still can handle those as well. So that's basically what RPA is. It is a new industry. Although automation has been around for a long time, in terms of desktop automation based on each of the desktop elements that we see on the screen, that kind of automation, which is essentially what RPA that is relatively new. And some of the top players right now in terms of this kind of providers of software platform are the top three are Blue Prism, UiPath, and Automation Anywhere. I've worked with all of them, and the project I'm currently working on is using UiPath, but they all have their individual benefits, and we'll look into that in a minute.
Okay, thanks, Rinat. I think that was quite a good introduction to robotic process automation, RPA in short. I mean, while you were talking about these things, I just realized you said it's desktop. So now in desktop, we have these different Windows platform, OS X platform, Apple platform, and then Linux. So can you automate on every desktop, or is it limited to just Windows?
That is a very good question, actually. Yeah, that is one thing to remember all the time whenever any business is trying to implement RPA is right now, at this very moment, RPA is only available on Windows. And the reason for that is RPA basically takes advantage of how any desktop application is built. So when the Windows application, well, the way the Windows applications are built are structured in a way that everything has a table. So if you go on Start menu and open the Calculator app, you'll see all the 10 buttons and the results window in the Calculator app. And all of these are sort of programmed inside one table. And then inside that table, there is a smaller table which has all the 9 or 10 buttons. And then each of those buttons are also addressed via that table. So you could easily address each of the element in a desktop application with the table name and number. So that's how an RPA software sort of understand where to click or where to read some data from. So the way Windows has organized all of these elements in the screen, that is what RPA leverages to interact with each of these buttons or fields, etc. I mean, Apple obviously also has, the iOS also has a different structure, but that's not what RPA does at the moment. At the moment, RPA is only geared towards Windows. Unfortunately, not Linux or not iOS.
Okay, so hard luck for the Apple users or the Linux users who are listening or watching this. But so I mean, majority of the computers in the world are run on Windows. So I think that's a big market for these products. So that makes sense. Now, I mean, coming to you also mentioned about automation has been there for a long and RPA is relatively new. Uh, I come from a testing background, and there are a lot of automation tools related to browser automation and mobile app automation and even desktop automation. So how are those tools different from an RPA tool? Because I've been using UiPath now as part of this project, and I can see that there are certain similarities. Like I can automate things inside the browser, but I can also automate using the same tool outside the browser in a desktop environment. So, are there any differences? And I understand that in the testing industry, especially because that's where I come from, a lot of tools are open source. And from what I understand, RPA tools are not open source. So, so that's one limitation for people to adopt. But are there any other feature difference, or can you recommend these tools to the general testing community as well?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So I think one of the main USP of RPA, um, the one thing that makes it different from all the rest is the interaction with the desktop or web elements. So you could basically automate a process using Python as well. I mean, you don't necessarily need an RPA platform software or like UiPath or anything. If you wanted to click a series of buttons based on what is available, you could program that in RPA or even C, whichever programming language, and various other automation tools as well. But the main thing that makes RPA different is the usability or the ease of programming with all the desktop elements. So if I want to program that, create a series, click a series of buttons and then read data from this field and, do based on what you receive, do a series of different things. All of these things, requires a lot of desktop interaction, click or read or,
Yes.
type something in somewhere. So this is where RPA shines, because to program a click, a particular button in Python will probably take a lot longer than in UiPath. I can just do a series of process in 5 minutes. I can program that in 5 minutes. So the ease of programming and the convenience that RPA platforms provide while interacting with the rest of all the things like not only desktop applications, etc., but also virtual machines and any kind of Windows based technology RPA can interact with. So this benefit is what makes RPA unique. And one of the other thing to look at is also that while it brings all this benefit, it doesn't make you lose out on all the other things. So for example, with Python, you would probably look at, if you wanted to do some sort of automation in Twitter, for example, you would look at directly talking to the Twitter's API.
Yes.
But with RPA, you could talk to the API as well as you could also talk to the front end of Twitter. So, for example, if you
Okay.
wanted to have a different website, for example, Rightmove, it's a UK-based property website, they don't have an API, or even if they do, they don't provide all the information you might need through their API, but you can get all the information in their front end. So for a situation like this, RPA is the best tool to use to get information of any kind. So yeah, that's how RPA is different.
Okay, that's quite helpful to know, because I've used a couple of automation tools, and I've used UiPath now, so I can definitely see the advantages, because you have single tool to use to automate APIs, browsers, desktop applications, so and even Windows Explorer. So that's kind of very powerful. So let's talk about the various RPA tools. You mentioned that there are three key tools. I think UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere.
Yes.
So, uh, and so can you talk us about these three tools in brief, and then tell us what tool you're currently using?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So obviously these are the top three, but not the only ones. There are, a few other solutions that are also playing in the market. So before I start with the top three, let me just also mention that Microsoft has its own RPA tool. IBM is bringing out their own. So there are quite
Okay.
a few big players who are trying to inject themselves in the market. But right now, based on the business strategy or the usability of the software platform, the top three are Blue Prism, and then Automation Anywhere and UiPath. In no order of importance, these are the top three. The one
Okay.
I'm currently using is UiPath, but I have used Automation Anywhere before, and I've also sort of managed developer teams who were using Blue Prism. So I have some understanding on all of them. Um, I'm not gonna. There is no one better than the other. They're all top. They are top because of the value they provide, and they are all good in some ways or another. And all a number of large organizations are using all of them, so they definitely can you know provide value to large enterprises as well as small businesses as well. Now, one important distinction I think between Automation Anywhere and UiPath, because I know these two in a greater detail than Blue Prism, and so I can sort of compare the two a lot better. And one of the crucial detail I think between the two is Automation Anywhere is, I found it, and I also have seen many people say that as well. Automation Anywhere is easier to learn. So someone who is, say, for example, in a bank, if or in a financial institution or in any large organization, if the strategy was to, instead of creating an RPA team, if the strategy was that they want to train their subject matter experts into learning RPA so they can automate their own processes, that could be a very effective way to implement RPA, because and then you're not having to hire anyone. The subject matter expert is the best person to automate something because they know all the business exception that's going to happen. They know the process inside out. So the SMEs, if they can be trained on building robots, that would be the best. And in that kind of scenario, Automation Anywhere actually works quite well, because someone with very little understanding of coding or or IT understanding, they can still use Automation Anywhere to make like simple robots. But there are limitations of Automation Anywhere as well, and that's integrating with hardcore proper the programming side of things. In UiPath, it's very closely integrated with the .NET programming language, and you can
Okay.
also integrate other programming languages very easily as well. So that's the other side of other side of the coin is UiPath. While might be slightly more, a little bit more difficult to learn, but you can do a lot more complex processes. You can automate or take on a very complex process and get a developer who knows what they're doing and make a robot that will take care of a really complex big end-to-end process. um, while Automation Anywhere
Okay.
can also do that, but UiPath can do that, I think, with UiPath is a little bit more powerful in that sense. So one of the thing about UiPath is you have such good integration with .NET programming that if you know .NET, then you kind of already half know UiPath. And then it has the drag and drop user interface, which is
Yes.
actually easier to troubleshoot. The debugging feature it has is also actually quite useful. I found it to be more easier to find bugs or troubles while troubleshooting in UiPath, because it has a really sort of comprehensive debugging tool. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, RPA or any robot has to be tailor fit for any organization. So it has to be bespoke. It has to be made for the purpose. So
Yes.
you can do that with any platform. But the one I'm currently using is UiPath. In fact, most of the projects that I think majority of the projects I've been involved in has been UiPath, and they also had a business strategy where they released the community edition quite early in their journey as well. So a lot of developers across the world already had free access to community edition, the free version with all features included. to learn and teach themselves, and also create a very vibrant forum where you can ask a question and get an answer quite quickly as well. So these are, I think, some of the benefits, some of the good strategies that UiPath has taken. So now it's became really popular. Automation Anywhere now also has community edition, but they only released it, I think, last year or the year before. But by that
Okay.
time, there were already a lot more UiPath developers already existing, because they taught themselves from earlier.
Okay. So, thank you so much again for explaining these various tools in such a great detail. So, one thing I took away from this is coming from a testing background and automation, a lot of times it's hard to convince the business to do automation or to automate things, because a lot of times people who are actually doing the involved in the day-to-day business, they don't think that a process can be automated or a task can be automated. So you mentioned that in automation anywhere, the people, you can train the people and they can decide what they want to automate, and because they have the subject matter, they are the subject matter expert. And in UiPath, you have the specialist who will come and who will automate things for the business. So these are two different scenarios. So in the scenario where the business doesn't know what to automate, how do the specialist help? Because this mindset is there in a lot of companies who either want to automate for the sake of automation, or they don't know what to automate, so they are getting deprived of the automation benefits.
Yeah, that's I have to say, this is one of the biggest challenges I've seen in most of the organization. Finding the right process to automate is one of the biggest steps when you're talking about RPA. And I've been involved in a number of organizations just doing this, how to do process discovery, or some people call it opportunity assessment as well. So um, interestingly, in some of my experiences, I was the RPA function in that organization was sitting within the business process management department, which is actually a good thing to happen, because business process management team, or they are mainly, they already have a good understanding of all the processes that are happening in the company. They track them, whether if there is any change in that process, they are the first ones to know. They also know all the step-by-step details and why those steps are necessary, that kind of thing. So they can obviously easily have a good understanding. I mean, say for example, they will probably have, okay, these are 200 processes that we have in our organization, and out of these 200 processes, these are the top 10 which takes the most FTEs, or it takes the most cost to us, or these are the processes that are bottlenecking all the other processes. So these are some of the ways to look at. Another way to look at is if it's a large organization and if they're offshoring, or hiring third-party suppliers to provide some of these processes, then what will usually happen is, in order to offshore, or in order to when giving this process to a third party supplier, they had already had to make a step-by-step guide in very detailed, clear detail, that do this, and if this goes wrong, then do this, all the business exception,
Yes.
everything kind of handled. So those are the first places to look at. Now, this is, I mean, what I've just explained, all of this is just looking for processes in a humane way, like, from your experience, from your all of this, as a specialist, whoever is knowing, who knows how to discover this kind of opportunities. But we are tech people, and there are a tech way of also finding processes like that. So there are like various process mining softwares, which is
Okay.
which is kind of like the previous step to RPA. So there are, like, some of the names I can remember is like Celonis, or can't remember any other names, but even UiPath has a process mining software as well. So what it does is, basically, all the processes are usually tracking something. Say for example, if it's a process related to the product of the company, so that product gets manufactured somewhere, and then logistics happen, gets sort of stored somewhere, and then marketing happens and then gets sold somewhere and then gets delivered somewhere. All of these things are sort of tracked by a product number in the
Yes.
CRM system. So if you just track how that product number is from the creation of the product, how all the steps it's taking to ending up into a customer's home, then you could if you give that product number to a process mining software, like
Okay.
and then the process mining software, what it does, it goes into the CRM system of the computer and sees all the ways, all the steps it's taken to complete its journey from start to finish. And then it automatically maps processes which are all like sort of all done by some, some which steps are done by humans and which steps can be automated. And then it kind of gives you the, okay, this part of the process can be actually
Wow.
automated. So that's the technological way to find the right processes with those kind of softwares. But now we also have to be mindful that these softwares doesn't always work, and it's not the fault of the softwares. It's because when in any organization, it doesn't even have to be a larger enterprise organization, it could be even medium-sized companies, the data is never organized very well. Someone did something and then someone else, they left the company or were moved to another department, and someone else then came in and they wanted to sort things in their own way, and then five different departments sorted things in five different ways. And all of this together, none of a company-wide data sorting or organizing never takes place. If everything is very sorted, then these softwares will work very well. But you're kind of giving it wrong input or insufficient data or unorganized data and expecting it to do something with that data when they're not really designed to do that, then you're not going to get the expected outcome. I mean, if you can give it good data, it will give you good output. But yeah, you just have to be mindful before using these process mining softwares. They are quite expensive even for businesses. So before using them, you gotta look into what data you have to give it before taking that decision.
Interesting. I mean, data mining, process mining tools. I've never heard of this. So this is quite new for me. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I mean, yes, I mean, I think that that's a very interesting point that you made, that a lot of companies have to overcome this challenge of identifying which process to automate, and they have to go through this whole journey through a specialist or someone else. But now let's get back to the tool, the main topic. You mentioned that you're currently working on UiPath and you have used that, and you feel that it's quite better than some of the other tools in what it does. So can you talk us about its main features? And you also mentioned about the programming languages. So can you be more specific about what languages can be used to program using UiPath? Is it just C sharp, which is .NET, or do you have support for Java, JavaScript, Python, or C++, or any other programming language? So yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I mean, UiPath is the latest one I've been using, and it's actually been a really good experience. It is quite powerful, and as I said before, it did take me a bit longer to teach myself UiPath. Automation Anywhere was a breeze. I was, fully well versed in it within a week. But UiPath did take some time, but it was really good experience because I found it to be the whole the, this whole platform bring give has a number of benefits that I haven't that are unique to it, and I haven't I think it's very important for developers, especially these benefits. So for example, you might think the support forum might not be a integral part of the tool. Yes, it's not a software, but the support forum is very important. A vibrant support forum, very responsive. It's very important for developers. I mean, any developer will agree with me, I'm sure, that most of most of the day or most of the project, what we do is usually copy and paste or integrate existing snippets of code rather than writing, from scratch. Most of the times we're integrating,
Yes.
and if there is a forum which are very responsive and very creative, and whenever you have a question, you usually look to documentation or you reach out to a forum where people can help you. I've reached out to forums and I've gotten answers. UiPath forum, I've gotten answers within an hour, and there are some cases they actually built the piece of code for me and then sent it as an attachment as my reply. So I didn't even have to code it myself. They just done the coding and sent it to me, and all I had to do is just put it into my, the master process. So yeah, having a forum like that is very important. The other thing the UiPath is really good at is having a like a academy website, the sort of a teaching website. And also, this is another thing you're going to think, oh, this is not the part of the software platform itself. But the way they've kind of built their, the self-teaching website, it's very detailed, very well presented, and it progresses in a step-by-step, in like manageable chunks. So you're not overwhelmed by too much information, but you are slowly, definitely progressing as well. So I've self-taught myself UiPath, and it has actually been quite a good experience for me as well. So that's the other benefit of UiPath. And third benefit I would say is to do with the actual software platform. The visual, the drag and drop interface is really good. But as a developer, I also find the debugging tool, I think I mentioned that before, it's actually really powerful. And I haven't seen, such a good, like such a transparent, or such a like a tool with so much information available when there is a problem with debugging. I haven't seen that with other platforms. So with UiPath, I mean, there will always be errors, and part of our job is to sort of find those errors and correct it. And with UiPath, it's actually quite easy. I mean, you could pause it at any place. You could start from any step. You could highlight every single step that it's taking. You could also highlight the buttons it's about to click. You can, increase or decrease the speed it's operating. So yeah, debugging is also is one of the main USPs of UiPath. And with any other RPA, like with any other RPA tools, it has obviously the power to interact with any desktop application, any web application, seamlessly. It also interacts with very different browsers like Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, etc. as well. So there's those sort of off-the-shelf benefits are obviously there. It has all the basic standard requirements that you would come to expect, as well as it has all of these other benefits like the ones that I've mentioned. So yeah, I mean, it has been a good experience. And so sorry, I sort of ran into a tangent a little bit. So you also asked about how to integrate programming languages. So
Yes.
UiPath is kind of really integrated with .NET. So within any activities in UiPath, you can write .NET code, and it will understand and work with it. But there is another thing which you can do, which is invoke code, which is an activity in itself. And with that, you could sort of invoke other coding languages like Python, C++, or that kind of. Now, whether you can invoke all kinds of code, I don't know. Whether it does Java or JavaScript, I didn't actually personally have to, because anything that you would want to achieve with the code, you can actually do it through UiPath's activity list anyway. So very
Okay.
rarely do you need to do something that requires you to write Python code or JavaScript code, because whatever you want to do, UiPath has its native activities, which does that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is possible to integrate other programming languages. Which ones, I'm not 100% sure, but I've never had to use that in all the robots I've built.
Mhm. So, thank you so much, Rinat, for explaining the features, especially the forum and the other bit. And it's quite interesting to see that a forum is a useful feature of a tool, given that customer service is very important these days. User interaction is more important for any product company. So, I think that's a good feature. But moving on from that, let's talk about what it can do for the users. From my perspective, coming from a testing background, I can see that you can interact with Outlook emails, you can read emails, extract files from it and process it. You have you can open a browser like Chrome, open a URL, and submit a form. You can interact with the API like you do with any API testing tool like Postman or SOAP UI. Uh, send a request, get a response with any REST API method. Then you can also interact with Windows Explorer files, file system like opening a file, deleting a file, creating a file, reading the file, and many other things. So for a user who is new to automation and who wants to start, what are the main areas of focus, or what are the main areas that they can do with UiPath? You have spoken about forum, you've spoken about their academy, and you have spoken about the UI itself. But what can it do? Can you give some real life examples that solves problems which can help our viewers?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is actually quite interesting to talk about because obviously RPA tools in general are very expensive for businesses. But one of the best part of UiPath and Automation Anywhere both is that they provide a community license which is free for any individual user. And leveraging that as an individual person or an individual contractor, whoever can use this automation tool to do many powerful things that could be a game changer in terms of how you do your things. So one of the things, for example, I did when I was using UiPath is I was ready to buy my first property in England. I live in London. So I had my different criteria set of what kind of property I want to buy. So for example, I wanted to buy a property which is half an hour away from London, central London. I didn't care like in terms of the radius. It could be East London, West London, South or North. That didn't matter to me. So if I go to Zoopla or Rightmove in some of the property listing websites in UK, then this filter, there is no way to filter this way that I can see all the properties that are around London half an hour away but not inside London, because that would be too expensive for me. So in Rightmove or Zoopla, you can give a particular postcode and they will show you all the properties that are in that area. But if I wanted
Yes.
to go to all of these areas, which are okay for me to sort of look into, I had no way of getting a comprehensive result which has all of that. And then again, with the results you get, you can't really do any analytics, or you can't even with something as simple as Excel, you could sort things, you could compare all of these data in a much better way than what you can do in these websites. So what I did, I built
Okay.
I built a robot for myself,
Yes.
and I went to a website which sort of lists all the places that are half an hour away from, half an hour commute away from central London. So I had a list of postcodes which are, you know, exactly the postcodes where I want to look for. And then I gave my robot these list of postcodes, and what it did is it went to Rightmove and Zoopla, input these postcodes one by one, and then gathered all the result data in that postcode area. So I had, say, for example, 50 different postcode, which will go around, creating a cycle around around London. And then I had a list of all the properties available, which are within my budget, within my criteria of the number of bedrooms, etc., and also within that location, a ring around London, if you'd like. And then, I had all of this data now sorted in Excel. And then with this power of data, now I could do create charts, create various bar graphs to tell me exactly the best house for me. And I was, I've done this analytics in Excel, and I was so confident at my top result after doing all of the data manipulation in Excel. I was so confident that I was ready to make an offer in a property without even visiting it, because I knew that that is the best property for me to buy in London, in around London area. But then the pandemic hit, so I kind of couldn't go through with the property purchase myself. But that's how confident I was. And that was all possible because I made a robot, and I knew that I had enough data to look at everything that is there in the market. So that's one of the ways an individual can use the power of RPA to benefit themselves. And
So let me pause you here because this is quite interesting, and this is actually a real valid scenario because even and people who live in London or people who live in UK, buying your first property is quite a big thing, and a lot of people go through that journey of going to Rightmove or Zoopla and putting the postcode and then trying to find the right property. Even I made that journey. Uh, but I think there are key elements which I want to break it down so that it's easier for the viewers. The first thing is you mentioned that the robot went to the website and entered the postcode and gathered the results and put it into an Excel. Now, if you break it down, the robots are from UiPath's to community edition. I think
mhm,
that's
yeah.
that's the first thing. The second thing is they are using a URL and going to the URL, and then they are typing the postcode. Now, when they type the postcode, how do you identify the element? I think that's something useful that maybe you can talk about, how to identify the element of the postcode. And the second thing is, how do you scrape or gather the data into an Excel? Do you take screenshots or do you read it? Do you look at the source code? How do you gather that information into an Excel? And I think that would be quite useful for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. So basically, it's just going into a little bit more detail. So I basically provided the robot with some input data, which was the list of postcodes. So say, for example, I had 50 different postcode. I put it in a CSV file. Each row contained one postcode. And then the robot would sort of loop through each of these postcode. First, it will read the first item in that CSV file, which is the first postcode. And then what it will do, if I programmed it so it knows the URL of Rightmove and Zoopla. So it will first go to one of them, say for example, Rightmove. It will go to rightmove.com. In Chrome, you specify all of these. And then that website will load. For example, you sort of, for better programming, program it so the robot will wait until the whole website is loaded. And then it will look through all the places, all the elements that are available in that website. For example, it has, in the front, it has the big search box where, where's the first thing where
Yes.
you want to put your postcode. But then, on the right hand side, I think, in the corner, there is something called advanced search where you can, put a bit more detail, like how many bedrooms you want and how
Yes.
many miles radius do you want. You put a postcode and you can put like 50 miles, then it's not going to bring you much value. So I put in, for example, go 1 mile radius from that postcode. And then I put the number of bedrooms I want, I put my budget and all of these things. The UiPath basically looks through all the elements, and then identifies each of the options that it can give, and then it writes it itself, writes wherever it can write. Wherever there is a text field, it can write it. Wherever there is a selection
Okay.
field, say for example there is a drop down menu for the number of bedrooms, like only 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it will click on that drop down menu and then choose the one that I would like it to choose. And then it will also write the budget in. It could be a drop down menu of like whole rounded numbers, like 100K, 150K, whatever. and then it will write that, and then it will know where the search button is, and then it will click on that search button, as if, the website is none the wiser. The website will know that a human is pressing the
Is
button for all it
okay.
knows. uh, it will basically simulate a mouse click. So that search button is pressed, and the website will, as a result of that, bring out the listings of all the properties that matched my criteria that I've set up. Then, obviously, that's just a list with only the basic information in each of them. But what I want the robot to do is I want to go into each of these listings. So what it will do, after clicking search, it will wait until the whole page is loaded, results,
Yes.
and then it will see like how many results are there, like 10 or 20 or however. And then it will loop through again from each of these listings. It will click on the first one and then go inside it and then read the data. It won't take screenshots, as you mentioned. It will basically read the data, because the data is available in the website as in text format. So it will
Okay.
read the data, copy it, and then write it in an Excel file that I've sort of created. I told it to write it in this dedicated Excel
Okay.
file, and then it will write it in the first row. Have dedicated column for each information: the price, the number of bedrooms, the distance from the postcode, and a number of other things like the description, what was the last price it was sold at. There's various information that the website provides in each of these pages. So it will take all of these and create a row for in the Excel for this property, and then it will click back, and it will know that you already did the first one, and then it will click on the second listing and then take all the data in and put it in second row, and then it will just carry on doing this until there is no more results for that postcode. And then once it knows that it collected all the results, then it will go back to the initial input CSV file that I've provided it and go to the
Yes.
second postcode, and then put that postcode into the search box again, and then put all the criteria that I've set in, and then do the same thing over and over again. So you can imagine it as a human, if you wanted to do this with 50 different
Yes.
postcode and each of these bringing up like 20 different properties, then it would certainly be quite difficult. Now,
Yes.
one of the things I did face is that there were, if there were two postcodes right next to each other geographically, then the same results, same listing came on twice in my output
Okay.
Excel.
Yeah.
So I could have, if I wanted to, I could have made the robot so it will identify if there is a duplicate and ignore it. But I didn't want to, I mean, this was a personal project of mine, so I didn't want to make the robot too complex, because there's only going to be a few of those duplicates. So in Excel, you could just easily identify whatever the duplicates are. So yeah, there is more can be done with it, but yeah, I mean, I just deleted the duplicates myself in Excel. But yeah, this is how the robot interacts. It can get any data, read any data from a web page or a desktop application, and then it can write anywhere it is allowed to write, and then it can click any button, double click any button, or press enter anywhere it needs to enter. So that's I think the main power of UiPath or any RPA software, that it can interact with rest of the desktop in this way.
Okay, so that is like quite amazing. But how do you identify the element in the browser? Do you use XPath or CSS path? Do you use the identifier of the element using tags, the HTML tags, or do you look at the screen, the screenshot or whatever, and then you identify it?
Right. Okay, so that's actually a good thing to look at. So UiPath does it, and other platforms also does it in different ways. So there are usually three different ways to do it. One is to look at the HTML code. In
Yeah.
most of the web pages are also sorted in tables that we don't see. Like, we don't see the borders of the tables, but everything is kind of in tables, on inside tables, inside tables. So you could sort of get a particular path of any item in the web page from that
Yes.
address of that table. That's one way.
Yes.
There is other way. I mean, there are other ways that, for example, if the website has a lot of responsive design, a JavaScript, where things are moving about, sometimes it's more difficult to do it this way. So in that case, you could, or even if it is connected via Citrix, or other sort of virtual environment, that way all of those information are not available to the host machine, the table, etc. For
Okay.
example, Citrix is only sending like pictures after pictures, so that
Yes.
information isn't there. So one other alternative is to actually just do like image recognition. So if
Okay.
the first attempt failed, because that's the most intelligent attempt to identify an element with its address, with XPath, with all of these ways you can
Yes.
structurally identify. That's how it first attempts. But for whatever reason, if that doesn't work, then the next or the last option is to do image recognition, where you could sort of say that this OK button, you kind of identify, you kind of show that, okay, this is the OK button looks like, this is the color, this is the design, this is the font, and you kind of take an image of that button, and then when the robot is
Okay.
running, it kind of matches with the existing image which was taken during coding it, and matches, and you say like how much, what percentage has to match in order for it to identify. So you kind of say like, okay, if there is an 80% match, then that's the button, and click on that button. So there are various weaknesses for going
Okay.
this way, because this is like the last resort. So say for example,
Yes.
if the machine where the robot is running has a different resolution than when it was programmed, then the picture size is going to be slightly different, or whether it would be more blurry or not, etc. So resolution could be a problem, or even various other things that affects how an image is presented.
Like pop-ups.
Yeah. So say for example, if there was a pop-up window which covers the button it needs to press, then it's not going to find that button based on image recognition,
Yes.
because that button is covered up. So yeah, there are a number of weaknesses using this, but sometimes that's the only way. But yeah, it's recommended to use all the other processes, first, and then as a last resort use image recognition.
Okay, that's useful to know. I think most of the other automation tools which we use for testing also. I mean, I think there are visual testing tools that looks at just the website and compares it to a reference image, but we have tools that identifies elements use looking at the HTML code or
Mm.
just looking at what it sees. Thank you, Rinat, for that. So I think it was a good talk. So I just wanted to summarize everything for the user. So we talked about robotic process automation today. Rinat Malik, he's a RPA specialist, and currently he's working on UiPath project. And then we talked about the different tools of RPA, and particularly about UiPath, its features. Uh, and in order for you people who are just watching this video, if you want to start using UiPath immediately, I think the best place to start is create a login in UiPath, download the community edition of UiPath Studio, and go to their academy, as Rinat mentioned. Look at it and then learn from it, and then start automating any process or any task that you want to do, be it on desktop or browser or API. So I think it's quite a powerful tool, and given that it has a community edition, people can start using it and enjoying it as soon as possible. So thank you so much again, Rinat, for this educational overview of RPA.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Amit, for all the insightful questions.
Okay, so that's it from us, and hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.